So you said you think you can see him winning that job.
Hmm.
What's the best case scenario for his rookie season?
I think the best case scenario is number one to stay injury free. Uh, I don't have. I mean that AFC North is like a terror dome, man. Like this, like every team is just like fighting to the death. So I don't have high aspirations for the Browns in that division this year. But I do think he can have a productive season. You know, I don't know if I'm thinking about like actual number. I think he can throw. I'll give him like 12 touchdowns. You know what I mean? I don't imagine him just like being lights out, but I do think he can have like a decent year where he just stays injury free and just learns. I hope that's really my main hope for him is that he takes this year and just like drinks it in as a learning year and just is really willing to learn. It's amazing that he has like Tom Brady on tech, so that's always going to help, but I think even more so just being able to say, what can I learn from this? Because you're not going to win anything, so you might as well learn something in the process.
It's funny you mentioned Tom Brady. That was one of the reasons I almost assumed that he was going to be a Raider at some point. They passed him up.
That
I
was
don't know.
my hope was I was
Yeah.
wanting. I've said to you off air, I don't have an NFL team anymore. I grew up a Cowboys fan, but I allowed myself to divorce the Cowboys and I feel free and I just play fantasy football with my frat brothers and my friends. But had he gone to the Raiders, because I had a Raiders jersey in high school, I would have been a
Was
fan
it
of the
Charles
Silver.
Woodson? Tim
I
Brown?
think it was, yeah, it probably was Charles Wilson. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
it was about that time. It was either him or Tim Brown. I can't remember, but it's like one of them. But like, I definitely was obsessed with the Raiders. At that time, so I would have definitely been a full fledged fan of them. But it just that really did shock me that he didn't get picked, and it added to the sort of like what's going on. Like at the very least, the person who like knows me for real should have said something. But who knows?
Yeah, and they end up drafting two quarterbacks. I think one is transitioning to wide receiver, but they do
Right.
draft a quarterback late. But it just seemed like a perfect football scenario. You're like, you have Geno Smith, who's 34, he's going to be there for a few years. You have Shedeur waiting in the wings.
Right.
Maybe the downside is if Geno has a 2-3 interception game, maybe the media starts asking, hey, is this kid going to get a shot?
Yeah.
That dies down. People will forget.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's the backup quarterback. There's going to be some shots of him, holding the clipboard on the sideline, and anytime the starter struggles, but I don't think to the point where it could destabilize the locker room. So it didn't make sense to me that the Raiders would pass him up, or the Steelers, or any number of teams that ended up drafting a quarterback either before him or shortly after him and later in the draft. So it's just there's a point where, like we've talked about, it goes from being, yeah, this is maybe because he interviewed poorly, or maybe his arm isn't what people think, or whatever, all these lists of excuses becomes a point where it's like, there's been much worse quarterbacks who have been
Oh,
drafted way earlier, and they've
come
either
on.
panned out or not. And it's like the NFL, any pick in the draft is a gamble, and it just seemed like there was a collusion element of, you know,
Yeah.
maybe we need to knock this kid down a peg or two, or him and his dad, you know,
Right.
because they were talking a little crazy about,
Yeah.
oh, there's certain teams my son's not going to play for. It's like, okay,
But
sure,
how was it crazier than the Manning family? The Manning family is allowed to do this. What's the
absolutely,
difference? Like,
yeah,
Eli did not want to go play for the Chargers. I mean, what's wrong with San Diego? It's beautiful. You know what I'm saying?
ownership, yeah.
You know what I'm
No,
saying?
John Elway did the same thing. I mean, it was a long time ago, but it was
That's
the
right.
same idea of I'm going to go play baseball.
That's right.
So, and the thing is, many times we've talked about guys who have slipped in the draft a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson, Aaron
Sure.
Rodgers, whatever, Will Levis a couple years back,
Hmm.
just as a recent example. Some people said, oh, he's a first round pick, but then he ends up going in the third round, which is
That's
like,
right.
okay, Shedeur, maybe you are a third rounder. That's okay. You can still be a productive NFL quarterback. You still have a 10, 15-year career. You can still possibly win a Super Bowl like
No
Russell
doubt.
Wilson we mentioned at the top.
Right.
Just I think we're on the same page here as far as hoping for success, but maybe concerned because he is in quarterback hell in Cleveland in the AFC
It really is.
North. But it will, of course, be watching very closely, like I think a lot of football fans, and maybe
I
not
know.
some football fans that just want to see him fail.
Some people just want to see
Uh,
him fail. Right.
yeah, how weird was it that Donald Trump decided to speak out? I want to hear your thoughts on that of him adding some spice to the discourse.
That was, he is one of the most unpredictable people in my lifetime, and to see him, be so effusive in his praise for Shedeur was very confusing. it was like, I was like, wow, this is. I didn't expect to agree with you about anything. Here we are. Just it really was a moment that I'm just curious, and it makes me wonder. Like a lot of times we get these sort of like biopics and giant like movies or books about presidents and other world figures, and I just really need to know like what was happening in that moment because I know President Trump watches a lot of television, and I just really wanted to know like what talking head was he parroting in that moment to be like this is wrong. Like why has Shadur not gotten picked? Because I didn't expect the people who were saying this is a miscarriage of justice, tantamount to how Colin Kaepernick was treated, to be on the same perspective as President Trump. Like, it's just not what I would have ever expected or could have called ever in my life. It just was a very bizarre moment that just adds to the absurdity of this age. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think it was confusing for us, but I'm sure it was confusing for a lot of MAGA folks that probably, had a lot of reservations about
Right.
Shador and his character, and oh, he's cocky and look at the chains and all that, and then
Yeah,
their dear leader comes out and says this kid needs
that's
to
my
get
guy.
drafted. Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure they're even more confused than we were.
No
And
question.
I think they just maybe just rich guys used to hang out. So back in the day, him and
That's
Dion probably used to party together.
I, I,
And,
I can't help but think Dion's been very good to him at Atlantic City at some point. You know what I mean? Like that's the only thing I could think of. Is like Dion just like hanging out with Trump back in the '90s, and he's like nice kid. I like his son. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
when Trump was, trying to get into the NFL as an owner and, and
Right,
then the USFL and all that, maybe they crossed
right.
paths. I'm sure they did at some point.
Had to.